Shalom Aleichem and welcome to online Smicha. Perhaps from some of the halachas I'll quote soon, you'll be able to realize how much enjoyment a yid has to have when he learns Torah, and perhaps also some other mitzvahs. In general, we find there is a rule that says that mitzvahs are meant to be done, fulfilled, and just do it. Just do it. And there's a mimer chazal, mitzvahs lav lehenes nitnu. The commandments that you fulfill are not meant for you to get any physical pleasure. Yidden don't do it for the pleasure, and there is no hana in it. It's just to get it done. Yet we find some halachic issues where a person did get hana from a mitzvah. Would it be disrespectful? Let me introduce this conversation based on the Gemara. The Gemara says in Masechta Pesachim Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, the Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan Haya Yoshev b'tziloi shel heichal. Rabbi Yochanan would sit somewhere near the heichal, so the shade of the heichal would hover over him, so he should be able to have. And over there, I don't want to say why he sat there so he should get the shade. The fact was that Rabbi Yochanan taught his classes b'tziloi shel heichal, where there was shade coming off the heichal. V'doresh kol hayom kuloi. Over there is where he gave us classes. And the Gemara says, hold on, the heichal, the Beis Hamikdash, we're talking about the Holy of Holy. How was Rabbi Yochanan allowed to do that when he's having benefit? He's gaining benefit from hektish, and there is an isur hana from hektish. And the Gemara goes on to say, because that's not real hana from hektish, the building, the structure of the Beis Hamikdash was made for the inside. You're not getting a direct hana. Sitting on the outside and gaining some pleasure from the shade, that's hana shaloi kederach hanaasam, sort of. It's not the right. That's not the way you call getting something directly from the Beis Hamikdash. That's the conversation of the Gemara. The Achronim come along and ask a question. Why was this even a question? Why did the Gemara even ask how you're allowed to have hana by sitting there and giving a class? Rabbi Yochanan, of course, didn't do any mundane thing. It wasn't a football game. Rabbi Yochanan was sitting and learning Torah. And when somebody's sitting and learning Torah, sitting and teaching Torah, mitzvahs lav lehanis nitnu. There's no enjoy. You don't do it for the sake of enjoyment. So if so, he didn't have hana anyways. He was there for the sake of Torah, and the mitzvah part doesn't bring any benefit. So there's many beautiful answers. Why did the Gemara have to come up with a today answer that it's not a direct hana, it's hana that comes shaloi kederach hanaasam? And it starts off that the Gemara in the Darim says that if somebody makes a neder and says, I commit, I'm not sitting in this hut, in this sukkah. I promise I'm making a neder. So when it comes to the mitzvah of yeshiva b'sukkah, he is allowed to go in there. Because all he said is you're not having hana from the sukkah. Sitting in the sukkah for the sake of fulfilling a mitzvah, that's not hana. So again, we see that doing things for a mitzvah, you're not doing it to gain pleasure. And if so, why wouldn't Rabbi Yochanan just be able to sit there without a Drei Lamdasha answer? So a fascinating answer is brought in the Sefer Einig Yontif in Eira Chaim Siman Nun. He brings in the name of the Meiri. He says, excuse me, by the sukkah, when the Gemara says that you're allowed to sit in the sukkah because there is no hana, so you have to understand that the sukkah has a plus. The mitzvah of yeshivas v'sukkah, the Torah says, teishvu, b'sukkahs teishvu shivas yamim. You have to dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. And the Gemara tells us the famous limud, teishvu kein taduru. You have to sit in the sukkah, dwell in the sukkah the way you dwell in your house. You don't just do everything that you must do in your house. You do in your house everything on levels of comfort also. So when you sit in the sukkah, says the Meiri, the hana of the sukkah is the hana of living in that place is part of the mitzvah. So even though while sitting in that hut, that you said, I promise, I don't want to have any hana from it. And now it's the night of Sukkot, I sit down there. I must be having hana because it's shady. Sitting outside, there is no shade. In the sukkah, it's more comfortable. But hana is part of the mitzvah. And when you do hana as part of the mitzvah lav lehanisnitnu. Based on that, one of the achreinim comes along and says, you know what? The same thing is about limud Torah. The way Hashem wants us to learn Torah, not dry. The mitzvah of limud Torah, the rule of lav lehanes nitnu does not apply. Hashem wants us to learn Torah to enjoy our learning. Lehisaneg b'mada, to get enjoyment of the intellect and the beautiful words of Torah. Pikudei Hashem yisharim misamchei leiv. He wanted to infuse happiness and goodness within you. So the hana that a person has while learning Torah is part of the mitzvah of the Torah, part of the mitzvah of limud Torah, part of the mitzvah. Just like sitting in the sukkah, it's like sitting in your house, so having hana is part of the mitzvah, same as when you learn Torah. Therefore, the rule of mitzvahs lav lehanes nitnu would not apply by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. You cannot say that he sat there, he had hana. The harei, this is what he says. Ein loymar da hana asay haisel l'tzarech mitzvahs talmud Torah u mitzvahs lav lehanes nitnu. You can't say the hana that he sat there was part of the Talmud Torah, and therefore the rule of mitzvahs lav lehanes nitnu applies. That a b'mitzvahs Talmud Torah loy amrinan lahachi. When we're talking about the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, we don't say this rule. The mitzvah zu nitna lahanes, because you're meant to have pleasure when you learn Torah. And Rabbi Yochanan had hana when he was sitting there b'tzad hechel, if he has no other place where there's shade. So he had to come up to another reason, and the reason was as shaleika derech hana asay.